Hey everyone, it's Akiba back for another episode of the SlateCast. Today we have gaming royalty, one of the former kings of gaming, you could say. And we've got Manel Sort, former general manager of King, and now the CEO of G4AL Games for a Living. He's going to be joining us. We're going to run the intro, and then we'll get straight to chatting to Manel. Hello, Manel. How are you doing? Lovely to have you, my friend.
Hello, great, thank you.
So your background is you used to be the general manager of King, which is obviously responsible for Candy Crush, is probably one of the biggest games they're responsible for. You're now the CEO of Games for a Living.
Just to be clear on that, I was general manager of King Barcelona. What I
Okay.
did was we developed several games like Papa Pea, Diamond Diga, or Bubble Witch Saga in Barcelona.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the King studios.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Which obviously it's a big big kingdom
Yeah.
that it had. So I wanted to ask a few different things around the differences between what I'm going to refer to as Web2 gaming, obviously around the mobile aspect, and Web3. And the first one is around the sort of the development cycle. From where I'm sitting, it seems that Web3 games are being developed much faster than Web2 games. At least from the outside as a gamer. What does the development cycle look like, and how does it differ between the two?
It's very different. And first of all, to my perspective, we don't yet have a foundation of Web3 games. So maybe to give some context on how I see things is the first in the gaming industry when we started, we had this evolution where it was all about the hardware. You could play first on the arcade machines. You had to play outside home. Then we brought that as a console in home, and then we had the handhelds. So it was all about how to push more polygons, how to get more out of that hardware.
Mm-hmm.
Then we had another big revolution, which was the internet revolution. That started with we had a shareware. We had, for example, the example of PopCap, where you could start download the game for free, play it, and then if you like it, you could buy more levels or just buy the full product. Okay, and then we had this in the internet era. We had a major breakthrough with selling time with Zynga. Zynga controlled the market. We were from Barcelona with my studio. That was when I was working at Digital Chocolate. We're the only ones to get the top 5 back then, besides Zynga Games with Millionaire City, and it was all about selling time. So we calculated that an hour of time was precious to our gamers. It was estimated to be around $1.2, and then we started creating and setting up the foundations of the free-to-play games as a service as it is today. But that was not sustainable. So at that point, we only had free-to-play games that made some money, still less than the previous premium games. So the last project I worked on premium games was Worms 3D Mayhem, and that making way more than any of the titles that we had as free to play. We were making good sales, and the games were improving, but we're far from what was going to come next. So we had to resolve this issue of, let's put the example of Farmville because people are more familiar. You started with a small farm, you ended up with this huge farm. And it wasn't fun. When it was too big, it wasn't fun. It was not sustainable. So the way it was resolved in the case of King, because then from Digital Chocolate they moved to King. In King, what we did is to solve this with the levels. So you have new levels, and then you reset the progression all the time. So the game is always fun, and that's what started this new type of model that's called game as a service. And others, like with Fortnite, they did. A battle pass, which does pretty much the same. You have this progression that resets every once in a while, so you're always entertaining for mechanics. Now, on the point of Web3, I think we are very in the early days. The first thing that came up was NFTs, and that was really basic. As a gamer, I'm a gamer. I couldn't really see any interest on that yet. Then there was this really interesting breakthrough that I will say exploded with Axie Infinity. Happened before. Explode with Axie Infinity, which in this case, rather than selling time, was creating value. So you have 2 axes, you create a new one, and that has a value. Okay, this concept I think, was very good. The problem was very similar to Farmville, like it's unmanageable, and all the business models related to that were working. So just to be very clear to what you were asking before, in our case at Games for a Living, we're doing a new business model. Okay, something that's more sustainable, and it's what I call Games as a Service 2.0. We're going to be releasing our game with the Battle Pass once we have the token ready and we release the play to earn version in March. and then everyone will be able to experiment this. And what I like it from a gamer perspective is that's a way more sustainable business. It's very similar to what happened with the free-to-play games. At the very early days, people were like, "We don't like free-to-play, etc." You always have that. Like back to what I started when the arcade machines started, there was all these people saying like, "Don't let your kids play with these machines and play games because that will make them stupid." Okay. Then when the internet started, was like free-to-play games are really like the worst thing in the world. I mean, today all the biggest games like from League of Legends, Fortnite, Candy Crush, and so forth, Clash of Clans Royale, all of those are free-to-play games as a service, and that's by far the main type of experience that gamers want these days. So I see something similar now evolving when on Web3. It's going to take a while. That's normal. I think I really want to make a difference on this. That's what we're doing at Games for a Living, to create an experience that's really sustainable. And then in terms of development, back to what you were saying, to me it's very similar. It reminds me a lot of the markets that I had to enter at the beginning. You go there, you see a lot of ups and downs, and there is a lot of people. There is a mix of people that generally did things wrong just to profit themselves. There is people that did things wrong because just of ignorance. They didn't really know how to set up. There is a lot of chaos, and there is a lot of bad perception about what's there. And that's what I like, because I think on any new technology, as I explained, any of these changes, with a lot of effort, you can always get something better, and that it ends up being the newest standard in the future. And being part of those transformations, it's always very rewarding as both as an entrepreneur, but also as a gamer, because in the future I'll be playing. Well, actually, not that far future. I think the first one will be released already in March. I think with this new business model that's way more sustainable, and we're getting closer to there. I believe.
So, what about the difference in user acquisition? Because I think there's some really great insights there, and to me, what you're saying builds on my current thesis around Web3 is that the business models behind a lot of projects, not just in Web3 gaming, but Web3 in general, are often a little lacking. We need people that have experience in running businesses to come in and take hold of these great new innovations that we have and make them actually make sense in the business world. We've got a lot of creators, a lot of idea people, but we need more sort of business function. And it sounds like with your experience, that is what you're bringing to the table. So the question I want to ask is around user acquisition and user retention. Do you see better opportunities in Web3 for those things?
For sure. I mean, that's one of the key things. Otherwise, I wouldn't believe that the next change is going to happen. So every time there is a change like this, in the business, we have something that we call the effective cost per acquisition. So that's how much you spend to acquire, to notify of a potential payer that will become a payer that your game exists. He comes in and then he actually pays. When we did the transition from premium games to freemium games, the philosophy was very simple. We say those of us who believed in that move, it was like, why don't we offer the games for free to everyone, so anyone can play? And that'll be great, because that will make the whole experience much better, especially if it's a multiplayer experience. Okay. And then the only thing we do, in difference of the old, and I think it was very sick model, where it was all about controlling the portrait, the brand, the review. I mean, it was a whole thing. Innovation was dead. If you look at the number of games that were released innovative during all that decade versus what happened after free-to-play came in, is incredible. And then with the philosophy was that if those who want to pay, you let them pay as much as they want, they will compensate for those that want to play for free, and you will end up better performing business model. In the last project I worked on, which was Call of Duty, the free-to-play version made twice as much money as the premium version. So definitely that's the predominant business model these days. Now, and that's better for everyone. Like for gamers, it's a better experience if the game is well designed, and then for developers, it's better because then they can acquire more users. I'm explaining this because this is relevant to what you're saying. Like, as you have that, you can acquire at a higher, you can spend more bidding for the users to come to your game. The business model will change. So as soon as free-to-play started generating more revenues from the average user, then the premium games died. So now more than 50%, 60% of the market is free to play. Now, if we look at play to earn, why do I believe now, based on all of this, that the effective cost per acquisition is going to be, the ratio is going to be really good with the lifetime value on play to earn games? Okay, and to be very clear and specific, to get into a massive growth, what you need is that the lifetime value of the first month ideally needs to be higher than the effective cost per acquisition. That's what triggers this massive growth that we had, for example, at King. That's what enables that effect. So why do we believe that that's possible? What we've seen is that the philosophy is very similar. It's like, if you have a game that can give you a return, more people are going to be willing to play that game. And those willing to play that game are going to be willing to spend more because they can get a return back. Okay, so that's the foundation of all of this. We looked at the very early data from Elemental Raiders, and we can see we have the one version that's more oriented to what will be the play to earn version, and one that's more like pure free to play, as the one on Steam, for example. And we can see different behaviors on the players. We can see that the play to earn players are more committed, and they are enjoying the game for longer. So they are playing for longer. That at the end of the day results in lifetime value. So I do believe that what we're going to be seeing in the next few years, as we saw with free to play, is that with these new business models, and we can get into that because I think it's important about talking about how to create a foundation and what's breaking most of the games these days. But once that gets resolved and we have products that are really good, and then they can start being marketing, what will happen is that this product will generate genuine, really good revenue for the developers and also for the users in this case, because we have this hybrid business model. But then what's very important is that this will allow these products to be superior to the free-to-play ones. And that will create a migration of players because they will prefer this experience, as we already saw with free-to-play. Of course, there will always be a community. There's still people that say that don't play games because they are really bad for your kids or for your brain. There is still people now in the second revolution that say that free-to-play games are the worst thing in the world, and we will still have in 10 years' time saying that web3 games are the worst thing in the world. But for me, what matters is like it's the same with music. Like there's a lot of people say like classical music is the best thing ever, and then you have all this. For me, what's important is what the majority of the population at a given time is wild. That's for me what's the best thing. Okay, there is no such thing as good or bad because there is all kind of tastes. But when we look at there is something that's good or bad as a society. So as a global society in the world, whatever is the preference in type of gaming, I think that's the mainstream type of games, and I think that those will be eventually in the next few years Web3 for this reason you mentioned, the relationship of effective cost per acquisition between especially the first month of lifetime value.
So that's absolutely sort of incredible advice and information for any game developers in the Web3 space that are watching. I think that's a really great insight. Do you think that Web3 in general, and maybe especially the gaming space, maybe not, but I mean, I think the fact that we're calling it Web3 gaming as opposed to just gaming kind of alludes to this, is do we need to hide the blockchain element, or do we need to be less upfront with the fact that there's blockchain involved in games such as this? Because when you're building a new mobile game, you don't necessarily rant and rave about the fact that it's using Unreal 5, although maybe you do, but you definitely don't talk about like the React Native code that you're using to build the application or whatever. Do you think there's too much emphasis on the technology, or maybe not enough?
That's an interesting question. Definitely there is too much emphasis on the technology itself. It's probably related to lots of like of the things we've seen on the past month. I think there is there is a foundational aspect here that's important and that probably then reflects to the rest that's unfolding. For me, one is like this idea of having tokens in a game that users can win money with. Okay? That type of business model has never happened in the past as such in a legal way, and I'll explain you why. Because I thought very thoughtful about all of this and how we could create an economy that works. So many times when they say Web3 games, about it's a game that has some sort of token mechanic where you can make money or something like that. Now the problem with that is that if you do it legally, what will happen is that you are allowed to award prizes in a game in a legal way, where those who receive those prizes are either the ones that are the most skilled ones. That's why they are called the skill games, or maybe they pay the most to get an edge. Okay. The problem with those systems is that if you have a cohort of players, the winners will be just a few ones, the top winners. Okay. But guess what? These top winners will be the most skilled ones and the ones that have paid the most. What will happen on the next iteration? You create a positive reinforcement to this small group. So basically, this small group becomes so distant to the rest of the group that the rest of the group says, I want to give up. Now, how do we resolve this? The solution is relatively easy. Don't make these ones the ones with the prize, make random prizes around everyone so everyone has a chance. Now, there is only one issue with that, and that works extremely well, but that's called gambling.
Yeah. Okay? That's the chance. Yeah.
So when you create an economy in a game, and that's what I see in many of the current Web3 games, etc. There was a lot about the token and this token that does this and that. A token can work if it works like an airline token. Like, for example, in our case, we have the Game Gold token, and it works exactly like that. It protects our ecosystem. We're a G4AL network will have lots of different games with a real sustainable business model. And then anyone that wants to interact with those will require this token. And this token is exactly as an air miles. Like, it gives you a VIP status, and then you can use it to get discounts, to buy things within the platform. That means that if someone, exactly the same as in an airline, if someone is playing G4AL games, will prefer to play another G4AL game than going to somewhere else, because they already have this token. It's the same as Ireland. If I have a VIP status of whatever state, plus I have that many air miles of this company, I will buy more tickets to this company than another company, at the same price, because that's much better for me. So I think a lot of this Web3 has to do with what I was saying. Like, the way to make money was more kind of speculative, and it wasn't very clear. It wasn't that much of it was more like, let's sell a token, or let's sell a lot of NFTs up front and things like that. That unbalances the economy if you do things like that. The game has to be, like, if players don't start playing the game from start and then build up the game, if you do a lot of pre-sales of lots of things, you have to be very careful with any of those, because that can break the game. And the question is, are you, and that's pretty much why many people have a wrong perception about Web3 games. Web3 games is about is about gaming, or is about speculation or something of other kinds, you know? What cannot happen is an activity where lots of people come in and they put money, and then they get this money back at a random rates because of the gambling. You can do that, but then go to a casino. If all of those want just to make a profit, I doubt the average will be higher than the entry. The way we've resolved that, and we have to see, when we have the numbers, I'll tell you, maybe we are able to end up with more than we put at the beginning, let's see, is effort. So we have this principle to explain this. I have the very strong belief that all humans value effort. So let's imagine that I have a couple of NFTs, and they are very simple, and I can do mouse clicks on them. Okay, and I tell you, this one has this one has, I don't know, 10 clicks, and this other one has 40 million clicks. You'll be, wow, 40 million clicks. Like, how did that happen? It's exactly the same thing. Like, just one has more clicks than the other, but we value that effort. For us, that's important. That's the foundation of work. That's the foundation of capitalism. So what we're doing is that we're creating an economy based on the effort of players. And we believe that's way more tangible and appreciated by us as humans, because if that principle is right, then we will value the effort of players, and we can create a real economy that builds up.
So how will you be utilizing that philosophy when attempting to convert players that, at the moment, I think the consensus is pretty clear that traditional gamers are very skeptical of Web3. There's been a lot of backlash, sort of famously with Ubisoft. Even their employees were quite against it. But you're completely right. Not just with free to play, but with mobile games in general. Like, how long, and it's probably still going on, do people not think of mobile gamers as gamers? Like, I know my mum plays Candy Crush pretty much every day. She doesn't think of herself as a gamer, but she actually probably games more than I do these days. So with those skeptics in mind, what are your sort of strategies, and how do you think the wider Web3 space can win the hearts and minds battle around Web3?
Well, what we're doing is very similar to what we did when we did free-to-play games. So at the end of the day, you need to have a great game. That's the important. People want to play a game to have a good fun. Then they don't really care that much what's the business model behind that game. They just want to have fun. That's the principle. So what we are doing is to create an experience that's very similar to what they are familiar with. So they start with just this great free-to-play experience. Oh, wow, it's pretty much everything that they've done in the past, and they enjoy it. We have a base game, for example, in the case of Elemental Raiders, that has a foundation, like similar to games like Hearthstone, but then we have characters on it. So that gives a bit of an edge, and people can enjoy an experience that's new, that they cannot play any other game that has the same mechanics. So with that innovation, they have a free-to-play game that actually is enjoyable, that they like it. I think at Steam right now, I mean, we got a lot of reviews, and all the bad reviews are the same, like this is an NFT game, etc. And that reduced some of our ratings, but still we are about 80% in ratings. So
yeah, I mean, I was actually really pleasantly surprised. I think at the moment, the scoring system on Steam, for those aren't aware, is overwhelmingly positive is the highest. Then it's mostly positive, somewhat positive, neutral, mixed, they call it. And then the same for the negative. And you're currently in the mostly positive category, which is almost as high as you can go. So that's some really great feedback. But you're saying that this version on Steam doesn't have the Web3 mechanics.
Correct. And what we want to do is this smooth transition. So you start with this game that's really good, that you enjoy, and then there will be a point that you realize that you can take your progress. In this case, is the car. Basically, the heroes have a set of skills, and you can take one of those skills where you've put a lot of time. Let's say that I have a skill that I've put 100 hours, and then you see that actually you can trade that. Okay. And that's something that's interesting for the user. It's way more deeper. So not only you can trade it, but as soon as it's an NFT, it also trades progress. How was your win-lose ratio? Based on the history of the card, will have different visual aesthetics. So even if it's the same power card, you could say, well, this card has like 100% win ratio, etc., and that's why it looks cool. You can buy it, but if you screw up the ratio, maybe then it doesn't work.
Yeah.
A lot of mechanics around that, and it gives more depth and joy to the whole thing of the card. But the fundamental thing is the same. It's like you put a lot of time, and then you can trade it. And we've done it in a way that it's not that basic. I mean, we have a whole thing that we call Battle Pass 2.0 to resolve the problem that I mentioned before. If we just did this, we'll have the problem of Farbill. You will have just too many cards in the ecosystem. So we've come up with a set of solutions that we call Battle Pass 2.0 that resolve this excess of cards of skills in this case in the system. I'm mentioning this because this is relevant to what you were saying about the transition. So you basically start as a normal player, and there is a point when you start seeing that there is all these other activities that you can take place with, and that's just fun. Not only this, it can be a way for you, maybe it's convenient for you at that point to cash in some of your work there, and you can do that. That's not possible in current games. In current games, it's just you paying the publisher, and that's the way money goes. I think the fact that people will say, okay, this is a game, it genuinely works really well, it's fun to play, and also have the possibility at some point to get some money from it. I think that will slowly shift people from the current games to the new type of games. But it needs to be very well done. I think that the issue right now is that that's not the case. I mean, most of the games have a significant dependency on the value of the things based not on effort, but on the speculation of the token, for example, things like that. and that's not a healthy economy. You need something that's like people think about how many hours are on this. Like I'm buying something that's 10,000 hours. How much I value 10,000 hours? How much others value 10,000 hours? Then whoever values them the most will be the one that can buy that item.
So, in terms of, say, Elemental Raiders, currently it's published on Steam. The blockchain version, which you say comes out soon, will that not be on Steam then?
That will not be on Steam.
Because of their terms and conditions?
Correct.
Is that?
Correct. It will coexist with the Steam version, but it will not be on Steam. We
So,
will
do
be
you then...
versions on all the platforms, just to be very clear. This year we're going to be covering during this month and next month, we're going to be covering PC, Mac, all the mobile platforms will be covered during this space in time, and then with different distribution channels. And then on the second half, we're going to be covering PlayStation and Xbox. So the game will be available on lots of platforms, and it depends. We have platforms that just don't want anything to do with Web3. We understand that, we respect that. We release as a pure free-to-play there. There is platforms that are an hybrid. It's like we like Web3, but slowly, like just do one thing, because our legal team is worried about. There's lots of also there is a huge problem of legislation on Web3 because there's a lot of it's a very immature industry in requires Sure. So in those, we understand that perfectly. That especially happens with very large players. That they are like, we like the idea, but we don't want to just jump in as crazy. And then for those, we have an in between. And then, for example, at g4al.com, you'll be able to play the full version, the full free-to-play with all win message. That will be a great free-to-play version game.
So do you actually foresee some of the legacy platforms now almost just being marketing platforms for the full version?
I see them as a really good platform for free-to-play. So I believe those players want to play these games. So they really have the right to enjoy them. They won't be able to trade it. They will only be able to trade, maybe, for example, with a guild in systems that current free-to-play games have. But what for sure they cannot, because the platforms don't allow it, what they cannot do is to sell their time. They can always, if the platform allows it, link their ID to another platform and sell the time there. Or they can go to the portal. So, for example, you mentioned that you are on mobile, you will be playing the game, and then you can open your browser, connect to g4al.com with your g4al ID, and then you can do some operations that the downloadable application is not permitted, but you will still be within the same platform. I think it's a matter of time, and I think it's justified. If I was in the position of some of these big players, I will also be like guys, it's great that you have all this technology, but let it mature a bit. And once you have like really good sustainable business models, and we see that people really like what you're doing, then we move, like we give you a push. But right now is very early days, and it's normal what I see. So we want to be ready because we know that many of these platforms are out there. Tomorrow they will say, okay, guys, we see your game. We see also the play to earn experience of some of the people. We want to enable that in our platform. I think that's going to happen.
So the last question, if you had to pick the three top problems with the Web3 gaming space at the moment, where do you see that we need to focus our time and energy to improve?
I see three. I see two that are very easy to fix, and the third one, which I see the biggest challenge. So first one, leaving, of course, all the legal part, because that we cannot influence that much. It will take time. But the main three, I will say, one is accessibility. So, I mean, a normal gamer needs to learn about wallets and blockchain, etc. And that's a huge friction for them. There's a lot of progress, and you'll see that once we release our play-to-earn version, our path is very, very smooth, but there is still more work to do there. That said, that's a relatively easy thing. That's a technical challenge, and to my experience in the past, technical challenges get resolved over time. Now, the other challenge that we have, that's also relatively easy to fix, is reach. You need, and that's related to your previous question, like reach is very important in gaming. You need to have as many people playing your game, because that's what creates like frequency, like high frequency to find a pairing so that you can play versus someone else, etc. You need to complain to make the experience more fun. Now, to increase reach, there is a lot of things that are required. There is very obvious things like localization, but then there is other things like making sure that your business, like your game, actually is a free-to-play game. I think that's very important because otherwise you don't have reach, and that's very important. Also, you have things like which platforms do you cover? Is your game PC only or it's cross-platform? These things are really important to create a huge community of players that are enjoying your game. It's not that important whether they are free to play or play to earn. I mean, there will be a bit of it's a matter of taste and also a matter of time. But for me, what's important is that they like the game, they like the experience, they like what they're doing together. And the third part, which that these two are relatively easy to fix. The third one is way more difficult. Is you need great games, which also include a great business model. Now, I hope that we set the bar for business models and people see that, and also skeptics start seeing that way. Hey, it's possible to have Web3 games that actually work and are not that scammy or they don't create these type of issues we've seen in the past. And also they can see that, hey, actually there is some people doing great games also in Web3. And that's very important. And I want to remark this. Anytime I've opened a new market, it's been with new IP. Okay, people think that I don't know, like when we enter Facebook or when we enter mobile, etc., you will go there and you will just take one of your old IPs and put it in mobile. That's not going to happen. That happens maybe later on, once you can copy a lot of things, etc. But at the beginning, it won't happen. What you need is to give players an experience they can only experience on that platform. So that's why you have like Farmville or Millionaire City with it on Facebook. On mobile, you have from Fortnite, Candy Crush, Clash of Clans, Royale. All of these is new IP. You have a very few exceptions, like for example the case of Pokemon Go. But if you look at Pokemon Go, it's very different to the normal Pokemon, and it's way easier to innovate with new IP. So I think that's something really important when I say games. It's not just a game that takes I think it will be a very bad idea to take like the Star Wars IP and try to make a huge Web3 game. I think you need more of a thing for the platform, create something new, create this IP that people relate this new IP with these new features that can be used.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense because then they can feel a sense of like ownership around that and connect with that brand, that new IP. It becomes part of what they're building into. That makes a lot of sense. So just to round up then, what's next for Games for a Living? Obviously, you talked about Elemental Raiders. You've also got Diamond Dreams. What are we looking at in terms of where people can find out more about what's coming next and what to be excited for?
By far, the first thing will be Elemental Raiders launching on March. People will be able to experiment many of the things that I've been mentioning. Keep in mind that the version that's in Steam lacks a lot of features, especially the Battle Pass. Reason being that if we released the Battle Pass then, people will have progressed on the season. And that will be unfair for the players coming later, especially once we have a mobile version. And we know a lot of players want to play on mobile. So all of that is coming. So that way people will see and understand better what we are doing different from what's there in the market. We will also launch what I mentioned about our utility token, equivalent to the air miles for those that want to be in our platform. And then at the end of the year, close to the end of the year, we'll start with the test with Diamond Dreams on July. It's a process that takes a lot of time. We want to get the best match 3 game in the market, regardless of whether it's Web3 or not. We want the best one. I know that 53% of the players of Candy Crush were male. The key age was 37 years old. And the visuals and the setting is not the best one for those players. So we've come up with this. We have in the team Javier, who is one of the world experts in virtual jewelry. One of his jewels was sold for 1.5 million on auction. And then he's creating this wall where you are a billionaire and you're building your billionaire mansion, and you're doing that through match 3 mechanics, which we think will have much wider type of users' interest. So that will be some of the key titles during this year. We also have a really interesting title that's called Soccer Legends. That's a project that won a couple of indie awards for best game. They really like this business model, which is way more sustainable and also friendlier with the current players that play Web2 games. And we just really look forward to see our community grow and people share experience. Also, let us know what they think we can do better. For us, it's very important because this is a community. All what we can do is to work together to make this this gaming experience much better every day. Because like at least myself, I'm a gamer, and I like that the people that play our games are also gamers. So we're all on this, and what we want at the end of the day to have a great experience playing games.
Fantastic. Well, Manel, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you and hearing about all your experiences, especially the differences between kind of Web 2 and Web 3. And I think there's a lot that people in the space can learn from what you've said today. So again, thank you so much for joining us. This is going to be the end of the SlateCast for this week, guys, or this episode. And don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff for the algorithm. Hate to say it, but I've got to. But for this episode, Manel, thank you very much. And let's keep in touch. Goodbye.
Goodbye.